Let's talk about Chris Getz, one of my faves. Big fan of Chris Getz. Got the job with the White Sox. He was the internal candidate, remember, that Jerry Reinsdorf said we had to hire because that would give him a leg up on making the team better. Meanwhile, the White Sox lost 121 games last year. Guess what? They're not in the lottery today. They can't get the top pick. I don't know if you remember this, but a couple years ago, when the new collective bargaining agreement started and it was negotiated, there were a few provisions that didn't get a whole lot of attention, but were pretty important provisions. One of them was what the union was trying to do to stop teams from tanking. And the commissioner's office wanted to allow teams to tank, to scale back their payroll, to intelligently start over when you know that the team you've put together has not won or cannot win. And what the agreement ended up being between the Players Association and the commissioner's office and the owners was that if you are one of the large payroll, large market teams, as defined by revenue sharing, which means do you pay revenue sharing? That's called a revenue sharing payor. If you are a revenue sharing payor, you cannot be in the lottery multiple times in a row. It's not allowed. We can't have the biggest teams tanking and not spending money because the union always says there's a correlation. Spend money and you shall prosper. The union conveniently ignores the Orioles or the Guardians or the Royals who make the playoffs without spending what the union would like. They just want you to think it's a direct 100% correlation. You're a revenue sharing payor, spend a lot of money, and convince the owner that's what it takes to win. So the White Sox have had a lottery pick 2 years in a row. They then lose $1.21 and they're not allowed to get it because they're a revenue sharing payor. Therefore, they don't get to pick until like 10th or 11th in the draft next season. So that means that other teams like the Marlins or the Rockies who didn't have the worst record, they have the opportunity in the highest percentage of balls to win the lottery. Is that an issue? How do you feel about that? That you're the worst team in baseball and you don't get rewarded with the top pick? In other sports, it's a major deal. Football, basketball, because those guys are coming to help now and those teams need help. In baseball, there aren't many Paul Skeens or Bryce Harpers around who are going to be quick to the big leagues and are going to help your team over the long run quickly. It's basically 50-50. The owners were more than happy to give this to the union as part of a negotiation because what the owners got in that negotiation was way better in terms of luxury tax thresholds and things that they can do with the luxury tax money that they collect, the competitive balance tax money. So the White Sox end up really getting screwed here, but it really is their own thing. And as we know, you can draft 11th and still be successful. You can draft in the third round and find a player. You can get Stanton in the second round. Piazza in the, 49th round? The White Sox, they had the 11th pick only 4 years ago. And guess what? They got Garrett Crochet. Not too shabby. So it's not exactly working the way the Players Union would have liked, but that's okay. They tried. And they'll have another try at the end of this season. The White Sox are trying to trade Crochet right now. As a matter of fact, Chris Getz had a quote about it. He said, there's a lot of conversations going on. We're not going to force anything, but if it comes to us, then we're not scared to pull a trigger on something that will help us. Whew. Thank God is all I can say. I am so thankful that they are not scared to pull the trigger. Very, very important to have a GM or president of baseball ops that's not scared to do the job. It's really also good that when you have a guy building a skyscraper, that they're not scared of heights. That is so important. It's also really good when you're a trapeze artist to be okay about falling into a net. I find it to be incredibly shocking and hilarious that the White Sox are not scared of pulling the trigger. Because pull a trigger, they will. If you're Garrett Crochet, you're basically refreshing Twitter. I've had players who have told me they do this and they hate it. they've asked me just to communicate with them. Just let me know. I don't want to read about it if possible, but it's so hard now. Ken Rosenthal just now, recently, is saying that the Phillies and the Red Sox are the teams interested in Crochet. The Mets and Yankees are being aggressive. No deal with anybody is close. Here's what I would say about Garrett Crochet and the White Sox. When you've got a player that you want to move, you call the big market and the big payroll teams, especially when you've got a younger, controllable pitcher. You assign different teams to different people within your front office to contact because the GM himself, he can't call all 30 teams. It doesn't work that way. So you give a list. You take certain teams for yourself as the president of baseball ops. Sometimes the president of the team even calls on a couple of teams. The Mets and Yankees are basically in on anybody and everybody. And that's a positive if you are selling. If you're an agent selling a free agent, if you are a team selling a player. We would have meetings as the Marlins. Think about this. Do you not believe it's irresponsible not to trade a player when someone's going to overpay for that player, even though fans may not realize it or be hurt by it? If you're the Marlins and you get an offer on Luzardo, or if you get an offer on Alcantara, or if you get an offer and you're the White Sox on Crochet, forget pulling the trigger and being willing to. It's malpractice if you don't. And we've told you that relievers you maximize at the deadline. Starting pitchers are second most valuable at the deadline. Hitters are third most valuable at the deadline. In the offseason, you hitters, starters. The order is if you can get someone as a starting pitcher traded, and you can get it done during the offseason, maximize his value. Because the risk of a starting pitcher getting injured and not being able to be moved is significant. The White Sox cannot afford to have Crochet pitch even one inning of spring training as a member of the White Sox in Arizona. They know it. The other teams know it. Now what you do is you get together and you put a list together of trades that you would do with each of the teams. You don't need the winter meetings to do it, but you have the candy and the whiteboard and all the food ready to go. But that's what you have in the suite when they say that all these GMs in their suites are giving interviews. In the suite, there's an area where you have a team by team. You have all the rosters up on a board, and then you're writing down what is your trade. What would you do with the Mets for Crochet? What would you do for the Yankees? What would you do for the Phillies, the Red Sox? Then you call the teams and say, here's the trade. If you hit the bid, you've got the player. If you don't hit the bid, you don't get the player. That's how trade talk actually happens. So the White Sox are in a position where they can move Crochet. They've got multiple teams trying to get him. This delay is not necessary unless they are overvaluing their player. And that is very commonly what happens, where you negotiate with yourself in a suite and you think that your player's the greatest thing since sliced bread, wheat, white, or rye. And then you go out to the team and the other team says, whoa, there's no way that he's worth that. And you say, no problem, we won't trade him. And then the other team says, you have to trade him. We got information from your owner that you're moving him. We'll see what happens, but it's going to be interesting.